welcome to Let's Talk About It with Taylor Nolan. I am your host, and I'm back with the lovely co-host, Kitt Bender.
I'm so lovely tonight. Thank you. How are you?
You are always so lovely. This episode was suggested to me to record solo, to really lean into the topic.
Okay.
But I decided against that because not only do I want a male perspective, because I think there's differences in how men and women, heterosexual speaking, can experience being alone, but also non-heterosexual too, actually. And you just have longer periods of experience in this than I do.
I do.
So
yes.
Not only just because of age, you're older than me, but also just a different perspective. So as much as I loved that idea of like doing a podcast alone,
there's a certain poetry to it, right?
Yeah. I was like, no, I feel like it'd be much more beneficial for people to have an added perspective. So thanks for being able to join on this episode.
I'm happy to be here. I do have some experience being alone, partially because of life circumstances and also partially just because of personality. I've always been kind of a person that has enjoyed alone time.
The peacemaker? Is
Yes.
that the peacemaker in you?
A peacemaker and an introvert.
Yeah.
In a big family, a big loud family.
Yes.
So I learned to cherish my alone time early on. But
Definitely.
Then, I don't know, it kind of became a thing.
Yeah, and being an only child and the only girl in the family, I definitely was more the center of attention and did not have a lot of time alone. I did have some as an only child, but, I had the cats or I had just me and my mom and really didn't have to be alone a lot. And today we'll go into a little bit of we're going to share some personal stuff, and then we're also going to answer some questions via the gram. You guys have sent in some questions about this. So we want to answer some of your questions. And then also we're going to share a little bit of our personal experiences, and hopefully through talking about being alone, we all feel a little less alone. And if we are feeling alone, that it is at least hopefully just that we are alone and not lonely.
Yes.
That you hopefully feel alone but connected.
Even sometimes just knowing that other people are feeling the same thing, that you're not isolated in the fact that a lot of people go through seasons where they feel alone. That it's actually a fairly normal thing and actually can be a really healthy thing to go through. But there's always the parts in our brain that are like, oh no, you're going to be alone forever. And some of that honestly never leaves.
Yeah.
But it just gets really, really loud sometimes.
All I could think about when you said, sometimes it just comes in seasons is really that, Fergie said it best. Boys just come and go like seasons.
She's a poet, that one. That one really succinct. It dials it down.
That's just all that was in my head. I'm sorry. I had to get that out.
She's Fergalicious, so you can't... Her body's rock.
Yes. I'm sorry. I had to get that one out. So I want to get into a little bit of the differences in maybe the male-female experience of being alone. And I want to ask you a little bit if you have ever felt pressure from people when you have been alone, mainly romantically alone, if you have felt that pressure from the people in your life that you should be in a relationship, or that I feel like women often get this pressure of well, where's your worth if you're not with a man, and what's wrong with you if you're not in a relationship?
Right.
Have you experienced anything similar to that as a man?
Yes, I've experienced a lot of that. So to give you a little context of my timeline, I was married, and then I got divorced. And if you want the full story of that, we did that on a few episodes ago.
Yep.
But I also was raised in a, like I said, a big family, but also really conservative. So I didn't really date a lot until I went to college. I was about 20 years old when I started dating. So there was a lot in high school, where when for a number of years I went to a different high school than everyone else in my family, or a different school than everyone else in my family. So I was kind of had already separated in that way, and gotten used to just venturing off on my own, even in the big family, and then went really far away for college. And then once I got in the relationship.
See, I also feel like just that point right there, though, is like way more common for guys that like if they go off on their own, like no one's like, oh, but was that okay for you to go that far away, like by yourself?
That's true. That was never an issue. And it was kind of a thing that I did on purpose. I was like, I need to venture far away from home and kind of create my own identity. So, but then there was the time where I had gotten married, and then it kind of really started on that track. But then got a divorce, and then dated a little bit after that. But there was definitely, especially from family, who, since I was one of the oldest of the whole, like, you know, a lot of the kids in my family, or my parents' siblings, all had lots of kids. So it's just, the extended family is kind of huge. And I was one of the oldest. And so I was one of the first to get married, but then also one of the first to get divorced. And there was a lot, every family gathering, it was very common to be like, you know, for a long time, a lot of pressure.
Did you feel like you ever got that from your friend group or coworkers or?
Not as much from my friend group, but I think it was because a lot of my friend group at the time was honestly going through a lot of the same things, because my friend group, as I was coming out of college, were had either diverted off into like happily married with kids, or their, you know, young, naive relationships were starting to crumble. And so there was a lot of just, my friend group had more of the people whose relationships were crumbling at that point. And so I kind of more got that perspective. So the friend group, it was not where I got as much of the pressure. But that's, I think, unique to me, because I kind of changed friend groups a lot at that time, like early on.
So would you say that there was a period of feeling alone from friends as well, not just like romantically or relationship wise, but like being alone, feeling like you don't have friends?
Yes, for sure.
I was going to say you're lying if you don't, because I think every single one of us, and I think anyone,
right,
even if you have such close friends, I still feel like everyone goes through a period of time in their life where you just feel like you don't have any friends.
Right.
And you just feel so alone.
And there was, I think that's exacerbated when you're in my situation because of the divorce. And we were kind of involved in a church, but then, like, you know, it got weird because she stayed at one location, and so that whole friend group that I had just got in a really strange place. And so I did pull away from that. There, I had one friend that kind of stayed with me through the whole thing. It was kind of a friend coworker that I was working at her music school. And so her friendship, and then also her providing me employment, we worked together to build something really, really cool. But that was kind of the only through line of person.
Yeah.
Pretty much everyone else dropped off, at least for a season.
So that's a whole other part of, like, when you're in a romantic relationship and sometimes you lose touch with that friendship system in your life. And then when you are no longer in that relationship, then you're like really alone. Yeah. And then you have to kind of rebuild all of that. And that, like, ugh.
But it was like, I just kind of embraced this, just threw myself out. I was living in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I just like rented this tiny little room in this house with this girl named Rainbow Girl.
Stop.
Yeah, her name was Rainbow Girl. She was like a recycling queen. Like, she would like go walk around at the state fair and pick up recycling. And she had like doves in the house that would like shit all over the place, and had this little Italian greyhound named Little Deer that would like run around and then like eventually killed the birds.
Quite the individual.
And then the other roommate was this guy named Tradon, who was just always strung out on something, but just absolutely hilarious. Just his personality was he's one of the funniest humans. And I just just threw myself into this really strange group of people.
See, I feel like sometimes when I feel alone, that I do find myself in like strange social settings. Like, that there's like something about being alone that like you kind of get drawn to this, like, I don't even know what word to describe it, but just this like, you just don't really care anymore. You're just like going to take people at face value. And you're just going to be like, yeah, that's them, you know,
Right.
they like to collect recycling and whatever else. And you just end up surrounding yourself with like these really interesting people, because I think when you're at that point where you're not just alone, but you're also feeling really lonely, that like just connecting with any human, you kind of lose some of that judgment that you would typically have of like, well, who am I going to consider my friend?
Right. And when you lose all that place in the social structure of people telling you who you are or what place you fit, and then you're just like, well, where do I fit? And then you kind of reflect that into the world, and then a bunch of other people that only kind of fit end up in your world, and it's a really interesting season. It can be fascinating. Just and they were like the coolest people, and really like, as strange as they were, it was just always fascinating to come home and see what they were up to. And be entertained, but then like just use it reflectively.
I'd be curious if other people relate to this, or if it's just us like weirdos that find ourselves with interesting people that like would be perhaps a little different than who we would typically become friends with.
Maybe.
Getting out of this season of being alone. So I want to hear from you guys if that's something you can relate to, or if we're just like total randoms out here feeling like
we
that.
might just be complete weirdos. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? So I don't know. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, but so I did have the pressure, and the pressure from the friends, mostly because I just changed friend groups, was never as much as the pressure from the family. That always was more.
I want to distinguish a little bit, like before we keep talking about being alone, I want to distinguish between being alone and being lonely. And you had a really great quote that you shared with me a while ago, and it just like really hit the nail on the head from what I remember. It's
from this guy named Paul Tillich, who's a kind of a philosopher and a theologian, actually. But he said that loneliness expresses the pain of being alone, but solitude expresses the glory of being alone. Where the common thread in both of those is that there's aloneness. But the thing that changes subtly is the perspective. And when that aloneness is taken advantage of, it can actually become a season of solitude, which has a lot of advantages. But when we're grasping to be in a different place, then that grasping always reflects back to us in loneliness. When we're trying to get whatever that validation, that scratch itched.
Yeah, I feel like when people associate being alone with sadness or some kind of like negativity almost, that's when I associate it with loneliness. Whereas you can be just alone in, solitude and be content, and that there are a lot of positives, and that, being alone can be a fulfilling act or state of being, as opposed to this loneliness of like yearning for something else. So I wanted to make like just a distinction there between like loneliness and solitude, and where for me, alone, like that's not like a feeling. Like alone is like a state of being.
It's a state, yeah.
Yeah. Where like loneliness, like you feel lonely.
Right.
And then I don't know what, do you feel solitude? No.
Well,
what would be the opposite feeling of that?
The feeling that
Fulfilled.
solitude brings is actually, it's a deep like inner peace.
Yeah.
It's a sense of self, in a way of moving, from what I found is you end up moving from a deeper place inside of you.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
I want to get a little bit into like journal stuff.
Okay.
It makes me a little anxious, but I hope and I think that you guys will be able to relate, and if not, learn some cool stuff about my past.
Yeah.
And then, Kitt, you're going to share a little bit too.
Okay. So I'm curious, I have to ask, you have this journal entry, but it's typed out. do you normally type your journals, or was this like a school thing?
So this was 2014. So this was the first semester of grad school. And I don't know why. I hadn't got back into like writing my journals. Now the last, 2-3 years, everything's been handwritten. There's been, actually, I take that back. Like Women's Tell All, I typed stuff up. But yeah, I used to type it all because I just had so many things, and I was just like clicking away on my keyboard. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. That's just kind of how I did it.
And then had you already printed it out, or did you print it out for this?
So I printed this out. Actually, I printed out like all of my journal entries and some of my reflection papers from grad school.
Okay, interesting.
To do like a little collection of stuff to potentially like organize into some kind of a book one day, maybe.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Okay. Because like you initially were like, I'm going to talk about my journal, and you pull out like a nicely typed piece of paper. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Now...
I love it. No, it'd be a great book.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe one day. So for some context here, when I think about being alone, I think back to this period of time in my life. It was actually the most alone I've ever been in terms of like romantically, familially, platonically, just everything. Mm-hmm. My cat Mocha, who I had for 18 years, that's why I'm Tay Mocha. We were like attached to the hip. She was my baby girl. She had recently passed away in September, and then a few weeks later, my boyfriend at the time and I split up, and then I was living in our single family home alone. And then my parents had also moved across the country from Baltimore to Seattle, and my mom Teresa had also passed away.
That's so it was a lot of things all at once.
It was a lot of things, and then I was starting the new program. This was in November, and the program had started in August. So was really started off this program just so many changes all at once. Yeah. And yeah, that was just kind of when I started doing a lot of reflecting, because I was the most physically alone I had ever been in my whole life. I had never lived that far away from my family. I had usually been in a relationship. The relationship I was in, we had been together for like 3 years. We lived together for several years. And being in the new program, I didn't make a whole lot of friends in college because I was with him most of the time. And so I was very alone. And then here I am living in this single family home by myself in Baltimore, doing my grad program and doing rescue work with cats and taking care of my garden. That was my life at this time.
Wow. And then you had a laptop and some thoughts spewed into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here we go.
Okay.
This is very vulnerable. So November 14th, 2014. Alone on a Friday night. Thinking of myself as a young, beautiful woman being alone on a Friday night seems very depressing. Why am I not out? I should be at the bars or on a date. Why isn't this night being filled with socializing or the attention of others? Does this make me pathetic? I think all young women feel this way when they think, it's a Friday night. Why am I not doing anything? I think it takes true strength in being comfortable with who you are to not feel pathetic being alone on a Friday or Saturday night. Here comes Lily running. I don't know if you guys could hear that.
I hope the mics picked that up, yeah.
She knows. She's like, oh.
It was a gallop. Wow.
It was. She just galloped over to me. She could feel my nervousness in sharing this. Mm-hmm. No one else has to want to be with you, and you don't have to be out doing something. I think my dilemma is that I would like to be out doing something. It would be great to be out with a group of girlfriends. Tomorrow night I should be, but regardless, I think the feeling of wanting to be social and not having the option to do so is sad. That is okay to be sad about that. But I can't think, oh, I'm going to be alone forever. This is valuable time wasted. Because it isn't. This is valuable time for me to do whatever I want to do alone without anyone else's input. All I need is myself, my cats, some television, and things to organize. Now that is a pretty decent Friday night. Do I keep going?
Is there anything you want to unpack there first?
First, I think this was also a question that someone had wrote in, asking about, at times you feel shamed when you're excluded from certain social gatherings and you feel like your life is less than. And I think there really is nothing worse than like wanting to go out and socialize and not having the option to do so. And I think especially being a young woman who's usually gotten attention and has been used to being surrounded by other people, that it can feel really painful and it can feel like really shameful of like, God, it's like a Friday night, everyone's out. Like, why am I not out?
So I think you tapped into something really, it was a really key phrase you used in there where you set up the situation and then you said it's upsetting because you're alone, but you don't want to be. You're not out, but you want to be out. And I think that's like the core gnawing. That's where that's where the pain comes from, is because we have an expectation of a thing that we think should be happening. I should be out. This should not be the way things are. And then it's that way.
But see, I think it's also important to ask yourself, are you shitting yourself or is this really something that you want? Because I think at this time in my life, reflecting back to that night, I think that more of my wanting to be out was to avoid the pain of being alone. And it was almost like talking myself through it and saying that, like, I think to be alone, you have to be really, that like it takes a lot of strength to just be comfortable with who you are and to not feel pathetic being alone on a Friday night.
Right.
Because even if I wanted to go out and didn't have the option to, it still wouldn't be as painful if I wasn't doing it out of not wanting to be alone.
Right.
And I mean, that's weird actually that we're covering this now, because I'm going to grab my handy dandy Untethered Soul. Because literally just 2 days ago, yesterday, was reading this section.
In your slow work through the book?
In my slow work through this book. But talking about how, like, when we have a pain in our psyche, that everything we do in order to avoid that pain only fulfills that pain. Because if we go into something because we don't want this to happen, then anything that does happen, our insecurity and our filter is going to still see that come through. They actually use the example of... this one, they used an example of a dog. Sorry, I'm going to find this because it just really rung true to this.
Well, that just made me feel that, or think that I feel that most of us have deep down this like deep inner fear of being alone. And that's like...
Yes.
That is maybe for some of us like our most pressing fear is, oh no, I'm going to be alone.
Yes. So this is the paragraph in Untethered Soul.
Okay.
Let's take a moment to see how these layers build up. In order to avoid the pain of rejection, you work hard to maintain friendships. Since you've seen that it is possible to get rejected, even by friends, you're going to work harder and harder to avoid it. To succeed, you have to be sure everything you do is acceptable to others. This determines how you dress and how you act. Notice you're no longer focused directly on rejection. Now it's about your clothes, how you walk, or what you drive. You've gone another layer further from the core pain, being alone, rejection. If somebody comes up to you and says, wow, I thought you could afford a nicer car than that, you feel a certain disturbing reaction. How could that cause pain? What's the big deal if somebody says something about your car? You have to ask yourself, what is that reacted in your heart? What is that feeling? Why is that happening? People don't normally ask why. They just try to keep it from happening.
They don't try to ask why. They just try to keep it from happening.
Yep. So how do you keep yourself from feeling the pain of rejection or the pain of loneliness?
I actually wrote right here as I was preparing my notes on like how to things to do while you're in this time of loneliness, however long it is. I wrote, keep asking why.
So many things are connected.
Yeah. Because it's if we're not supposed to be alone for whatever season it is, whether it's a short season or a long season, we wouldn't be. Mm-hmm. And if we are, then I think it's way more important to not just sit and say, "Oh no, why?" Point fingers as to why you could be alone, but genuinely sit with, well, why am I? Is it because is there something that I have to learn? Is there something that I have to change? Is there some place that I have to heal? Whatever it is, but we have to keep asking why and actually sit with that why for a little while before, and let it get uncomfortable before it really does anything really good.
Yeah.
But keep asking why.
Keep asking why.
Yeah.
I like it. Should I keep up with this journal? Should I keep going on this?
Let's keep going.
Okay. This gets a bit vulnerable here, guys. And forewarning, your girl had some experience as a promo girl at the Hustler Club.
Okay,
and,
we'll get there. We'll get there, and I'll tell you my reaction with this part.
Okay. We'll see with how Taylor dealt with being alone.
Yeah, okay.
2014.
So how many, this is a few days later?
This is the next day.
The next day, okay.
So that was Friday evening when I was questioning myself. Now, this is Saturday evening. Saturday evening, haven't left the house, haven't changed out of PJs, canceling plans to go to DC because I have no money, can likely only afford gas. I have $36. Money is ruining my happiness. So many things are unsure in my future, and I just want everything to be figured out. I sent in an application to be a shot girl, whatever the fuck that is. I just need some fucking money. I can barely afford food. What a crazy time in my life. Never imagined things being like this. I am literally wishing I had a fucking sugar daddy. I need to go out to a nice club and meet an older man with no responsibilities. Just give me an allowance. Is it too much to ask for?
This is 21-year-old Taylor Brand?
Yes.
Are you 21? Okay.
Yes. I'm so frustrated and stressed out. I would like to think that a young, beautiful 21-year-old shouldn't have to have all this on her, but that is life. I think I just need to put on a sexy dress, some heels, intense makeup, and call it a night. Live a little.
It's like a pep talk. It's like you go to this extreme in your brain, but like you're not going to do that.
Yeah, I really hope that you all are laughing along with me and not judging me on this. Obviously, a very low-ish point in my life. Grad school, no money, very alone.
Okay, wait, but hold on. It gets better. Keep reading. I'm just furthering the anticipation here.
Okay, this is how Taylor got through grad school, guys. So later on, after I said, live a little, said, well, I did it. I went to a strip club and applied for a job. Not stripping.
Okay, but when you first read this to me, you put a long pause after strip club and asked for a job. You didn't keep going. And I was like, oh, this took a left turn. This was grad school Taylor, the story that I didn't hear, the untold tales. But not as bad as I initially had thought.
Yeah, so not stripping. I will be a promo girl. Was asked to do a room for guys twice while there, and the bouncers said I would make the most tips and that I was their favorite girl there. I would say this is a good start.
All right.
Went to meet up with a girl from class in Fells Point. If those of you in Baltimore know Fells Point, there we go. Of course, same situation. I'm stuck here with girlfriends who are just making out with dudes at the bar, leaving me stranded. I thought of going home, like I did last time. Started to think, what the fuck is happening? Stopped myself, though. Walked over to Bond Street by myself and just took it from there. I wasn't going to let them ruin my night. I'm not going to be that girl that fills space. I make the space. Went over to Bond Street and the bartender was pretty cute. So I put myself out there and told him I liked his beard and his sleeves. Ended up talking to this group of guys that were there for a surprise party. They were all pretty awesome. I ended up having a really good time with them, exchanged numbers, and will hopefully hang out with them soon. I was going to give the bartender my number. Maybe next time. A guy followed me over to Bond Street from the first bar, waited until they closed, and I came out, and then he proceeded to follow me to my car to try to get my number. I didn't cave, though. I straight up told him that shit is not happening. Go me. I went out by myself twice tonight, had fun, looked good, held my own, stayed true to myself, and will probably definitely be offered a job where I can make mad tips looking bomb as hell. Here's to new beginnings and being comfortable out on my own.
What do you think when you're like reflecting back on that? Like that whole night, like which you did describe him so vividly.
All of that night. I mean, I think parts of me obviously were very lost, but I think I was also using what I had to do to get to where I needed to be. I needed to get money. I mean, I could have obviously found other ways to do that, but the easiest way to make the most amount of money I could. I mean, working in community mental health, I would not have been making $20 an hour while in grad school, and I wouldn't have been able to, work those hours along with my classes. So, it also, honestly, taking the job, being a promo girl actually allowed me to get out and socialize. Like, all I did was go out to bars and, like, hand out free admission passes. And so I don't drink and I didn't really have a lot of friends. And so, like, going out with a group of girls, with coworkers, to just, like, go out to the bars and meet people, like, I was like, well, not only is this, like, $20 an hour, but then I get to, like, just have fun, get dressed up, like, not in anything, over the top, just like how I would normally going out. And
but without the pressure of like, you got to go to a bar and hang out and talk.
Yeah. And it was just like, okay, this is like getting me out. Like, I'm not feeling as alone because I had something to go do, and like that felt really nice. But I think when I go back and read it, I'm proud of myself that I kept going, that, the whole like, make your own space.
I know you went a little Tony Robbins on yourself there for a minute. Don't cave to the space. Yeah. Be the space.
I was like, don't feel left out. Like, I think that was a few questions that we got from you guys as well of like, how do you not feel like left out? And here I was out with people, but was still feeling super left out. Like, and to just say, well, I'm not going to let that ruin my night. I'm still going to, I'm going to go across the street to this other bar and like, who cares if I'm alone? Like, I really, that whole year, I really challenged the notion of like going out as a girl by myself.
And you did it on purpose.
Yeah. And it was actually not too long ago, I did an Instagram story on this because even if I'm out with friends, but I'm like walking to my car by myself as a woman, it's always like, oh, like, girl, you good? Like, you lost? Like, where's your man at? Like, and it's like, I can't just be out by myself. Like, do I look like I'm lost? No, because I'm not. Like, you can leave me alone. Like, I'm just out by myself, and that's okay.
Yeah, sometimes. Also, don't be an idiot.
Yes, obviously. I mean, I wasn't an idiot. I knew the streets of Baltimore. I knew them.
Yeah, you knew Baltimore. Just wear those hoops, and then you could take it.
Oh, yeah. But then, so this is like 2 days later. I said, this is how things are meant to be. Sean Hayes Pandora, crazy cat lady mug with ginger tea, my adorable sitting room, fat ass Theo on my lap, Lily sitting by my head, typing a reflection paper. I can feel Theo purring on my lap, but also can't feel my legs anymore. I'm nice and comfy in my crazy cat lady fuzzy sweater. I am physically alone. I am content. I have it good. I have it real good. Moments like this make me feel like I'm not as empty as I think I am.
That's how many days after the initial?
3.
3 days. Interesting. It's quite a wild ride. But I love the use the word content, because that to me feels like a word that can describe being alone when it's not expressing as loneliness, when it's expressing as solitude. It's a moment of actual solitude is knowing that you're content exactly where you are.
Yeah.
Which is actually, it took me years to get there. You're smart. You do it in 3 days. It took me years of being alone.
No. I just want to clarify this too for anyone.
But you're not?
It definitely goes in waves. And
for sure.
Throughout the rest of the journal, I definitely act out in ways to fill the pain of loneliness. And I think that's still something that I'll always be, challenging myself in, because there are times where alone feels content and it feels so nice and I love it. There are other times where loneliness does come in and it's like, okay, how do I sit with this and how do I become content with being alone right now?
Yeah.
And, the things I'm doing, is it trying to avoid the pain of that loneliness, or is it just to further, add joy and connection into my life? I mean, like the whole reason being alone can be so scary and can be so, depressing and lonely is because we're such social beings.
Yeah,
like we thrive off of connection. Solitary confinement is our highest form of torture.
It really is, yeah. So what I think is, what I was saying is that it took me many, many years to do is to get to a place where I found that I would, on multiple nights in a row, find that I was ending up alone, but not not in a bad way. I didn't think, oh man, I wish this girl would have come home with me, or I wish that I would have gone out with these friends or whatever, where I actually at the end of it felt like, man, I accomplished a lot and I did it. And I would have never have had the time to sit and maybe write a thing that I got a chance to write. If I had
the one thing you wrote that you're going to share with us?
Maybe. I've written a lot of things in that time.
The one that I'm talking about?
Yeah. But I would find that I got to experience that fairly regularly.
Yeah.
And that was actually a really, really cool thing to just realize, that I could on multiple occasions come home alone, but not have any kind of overwhelming sense of loneliness in it. Actually be quite happy of what was accomplished in this time that I had, set aside for myself, or found myself in by myself, whether I chose it or not.
Yeah.
So that was nice. Anyway.
Yeah. So you got some lyrics to share with us, Kitt Bender? About being alone? Is it about what loneliness feels like? Or is it about what being alone?
Well, to me, the sound of the song, like when you listen to the song, it sounds like what it feels like to be alone. That's what I realized. I wrote this song a few years ago, but I don't know. Do you want me to just read lyrics, or do you want me to like actually you want to hear the song?
Like how much, is there like a certain part that like really sticks out to you, or like you want to go the whole way?
In reading it or in listening to it?
In reading it. Actually, you know what? I have a great idea. Read a section of it and then do a post on your Insta at Kitt Bender, 2 T's, of the song, because this is a way of me encouraging you to post more of your music.
Okay.
And then people can go and listen to the whole thing.
Okay. Remind me, and when this post goes live,
yes,
I will do Insta stories of this song.
Yes.
Okay. Deal. Okay. It's called Never Say Never. There, hold me to it.
Okay. Never say never. So if you want to read some of the lyrics to us, it's about what it feels like to be.
Never say never, say never. Say it can only be this way. Since 5 a.m, you haven't been out of my mind. Never say winter is where the true love goes to die. December, it cracks in the bones, buried so deep in the lonely shadow from summer untold. Stories from back in the only time we remember as not, so far away from the home we made on the streets by the dock, not bothered by all that we won't be. Never say never, say never. It can only be this way. Since 5 a.m, you haven't been out of my mind. Never say winter is where true love goes to die.
You have such a beautiful poet voice.
Wait, what second verse? Second verse is my favorite. I'm just going to give you second verse.
Go for it. Give it to us, Kitt.
I saw lovers in a park, under an ocean of starlight, burning a hole in the spark, whispering under the stage fright. Happy for ending of days, the edge of the tunnel is so bright. Illuminating the ways, all of the pain becomes delight. Boom.
Boom.
Then there's a pretty bomb-ass piano solo right there.
We're going to hear it on the gram.
Okay, you'll hear it.
How does it make you feel to like think back to yourself writing those lyrics and the time that you were in?
It was written during a time when in those very, very deep places, like we have those initial place where we are alone. We begin a season of being alone, whether it's a season that's maybe right after a breakup, or maybe a much longer season like I've been on, where we confront different elements of being alone. Like the first part is just where we're confronting that part of us that where something's abnormal. We're used to someone being around and then not around, and we got to get used to that. But then we start actually dealing with that question, that deep inner question of like, I'm afraid to be alone.
Yeah.
It really scares me to just sit with that.
Yeah.
And to just like desperately want to grasp for anything that can like satiate that, but then just sit there, but then also be like, I mean, it doesn't always have to be this way, does it? But hold both of those things. Be there. Even though like, you know, it's not going to be, and because it's the worst thing ever. But it's learning to hold both of those things.
Yeah.
And think of those memories and have them be delightful memories instead of ones that go, oh, if only that person, if only that person didn't get away, or if only whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. It's beautiful. I can't wait for you to share it. The whole thing.
I can't wait for you to hear it.
I think we've touched quite a bit on the loneliness aspect of being alone. And I think it's worthwhile to touch on where being alone, where having time in solitude can provide a lot of clarity, can provide reflection, can provide you with satisfaction and content. And Kitt, I feel like you're someone in my life that has reached a good place of being able to be alone and content. And like, you do things alone that like I have to, in a way, push myself to like go do. Like, you'll go out and, say run Green Lake, or go out to a coffee shop, or go out to dinner by yourself. You always, if any of you live in Seattle and know the local pub eatery in South Lake Union, Kitt's always there. That's like
there, yep.
his Sunday routine. Like, you go, you'll have, a little drink, a meal, and you'll write out your whole little schedule. And just the fact that you like go out and do that alone, like, is something I admire so much about you, because I think it shows that you've done a lot of reflecting and work in that area, and that also you've reached a point where like you're totally cool just being you.
Yeah. Can I tell you one big thing that I changed that helped me a lot? I wrote down like a lot of things that like, you can do when you're experiencing a time of solitude. Like, a lot of times there's a big life change that you can make when you don't have other people around you. You can really focus on creating new habits, all this kind of stuff. But what I realized is one of the most important things most important places to start is I started realizing that there are a lot of people that would probably look at me in some situations. Like, I think of a time where I just like walking out alone by the lake. Yeah. Where I'm like, how many people are surrounded by other humans all the time? Maybe they have a family, or they just, their lives just don't allow them a lot of space just to breathe I started just kind of really trying to own the gratefulness that I could have for being able to do something that maybe a lot of people couldn't do and maybe would want to. Just have a little time to just go walk by the lake because they just felt like it.
Well, the freedom to do it.
And the freedom to do it. And it's a thing that helped me a lot. To not just be sad about it, but be like, oh, a lot of people really maybe want to do this.
See, but I think also a lot of people really want someone to do that with.
True.
And I think especially for women who are frequently told that their worth is in a relationship and, you know, all that bullshit, that like, I know even for me sometimes, like if I were to go out and like be at the lake, like I would by myself, I'm not going to lie, there would probably be a part of me that would feel sadness and also feel just this like external judgment from other people that like I'm by myself and that I'm not with a man or even some girlfriends or something, that there would be this sadness, there would be the external judgment.
Do you think it's really different with guys and girls? Like if you saw a guy sitting alone, would you think differently than if you saw a girl sitting alone?
I don't know that I would think that.
Mm-hmm. Do you think a general perception is that?
But yeah, because at least that's been my experience.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not a guy, so I don't know, but I know that in my experience of being a woman that, you know, in some way or another, I've received those judgments from other people. Mm-hmm. I haven't witnessed men getting the same. So I don't know. I think that there's definitely like people being labeled as loners.
Mm-hmm. Which isn't always a good thing,
but it's not always a
negative connotation.
Yeah, but even then, it's not always a bad thing.
No.
Sometimes it's like you're the cool loner. It's like, why does that get to be cool? What? But then for like a girl, it's like you're
a cool loner for a guy is definitely different than a loner for a girl. Mm-hmm. I think there's a difference in judgment.
Yeah, definitely.
There for sure.
And I think like one of the questions that we got on Insta from a very close, dear friend of mine who I love dearly. And she is someone that I know does really well being alone. And her question was, I love being alone. How do I make it more fun? And I could just so see her saying that.
Which is a great way to look at it too.
Yeah. And her other question that she did ask was, how does one cope with emotions solo? What are your personal outlets? So I think, you know, some of us being social beings can cope with emotional distress via our social support. And that's something we talk a lot about on the show. But I think there are a lot of other ways we can cope with our emotional stressors solo. Mm-hmm. And I think you have one great one that we've already just seen in this episode is through writing.
Yeah, for
expressing yourself creatively through music.
Absolutely. A creative outlet, I think, is a really important one. I think another thing to remember is that often that feeling from like is because we feel like we have a lot of love to give. Mm-hmm. And if we don't, and often if we're in a relationship, we're used to that being our primary place where we give and receive love, then sometimes being out of a relationship forces us to look at just other ways that we can like just express that. Maybe either having an animal or just or helping or
I mean, in my journal,
a friend that you want to.
That's where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm being my authentic crazy cat lady self, and this doesn't feel lonely. You know, like this feels. I feel fulfilled just being me because I'm in my happy place.
Yes.
But I think again, like you said, like creatively, like I know I used to do. I mean, the painting that's up in my kitchen right now, "Let Food Be Thy Medicine." That's a canvas on a painting that I did by myself during this time. Yep. Just doing things that allow you to express yourself, whether it's like journaling. For me, it's like rollerblading, you know, but even I know sometimes I'm like, oh, well, I don't want to go rollerblading by myself. Like I'll wait until, you know, Kitt can go running or if Kaylin wants to come with. But I think like pushing yourself sometimes to be like, no, I can do that by myself and it still will be fine. Just like in my journal where I'm like, I am going to go out to the bar by myself and that's okay.
Right. But then that's even kind of a next step where you're just like, I'm going to be alone and be okay. But then also like, wait, I'm going to invest in myself.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say, well, I don't have, but if someone else might be slowing me down, I can make big changes right now, and I can create habits that I can carry with me into a different season of life, actually, which is fun.
Yeah. But I think, I mean, as I'm like scrolling through some of these other questions, so much of it comes back to the asking why, like, where does this come from? Because even when you really enjoy being alone, why? Is also being alone a way to avoid the pain of rejection, of connecting with other people?
Yes. That's one of the reasons that I said keep asking why, because there's two sides to it. Because sometimes we're alone because we haven't, there's something that we haven't dealt with, and being, and I even see that in me sometimes. It's like to be in a relationship for me would force me to kind of come head to head with some things that I haven't.
Yeah.
And that can be scary.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. But I think, and that's, something that we've talked about with dating and being alone, that, for me, I'm definitely someone that's like, well, I'm going to learn through all these different relationships.
Yes.
Whereas you're the total opposite, and you're like, I'm alone. I'm going to be alone.
Well, I mean, there's some quote somewhere I read where it's like, I'll only be with you if you're sweeter than my solitude.
Ooh.
And to learn to have and experience a sweet, very peaceful solitude, like keeping someone, and especially because my love language is time spent. So it's like
quality time.
So it's like to be around someone, like, it's a big deal.
I hear you on that. But I think it also, for me, it wouldn't necessarily have to be sweeter than my solitude. It could be just as sweet, or it could still just be sweet. But then also, which could be a whole another episode, is being able to have that alone time and enjoy solitude while also being in a romantic, committed relationship. Because that's a whole other box. I want to go through some of the questions here in our last 10 minutes or so. Someone asked, do you feel like you're constantly distracting yourself from being sad while being alone?
Sometimes. Yeah. But sometimes we numb it, though, with alcohol or television. But then also sometimes or dating, or we exacerbate it. Sometimes we're sad, and so we watch sad things, and we feed the sadness, and that can be good too.
Yeah. Oh, this one.
Ooh, okay.
What do you do if you feel like distancing yourself from others because you feel like they don't care? For me, that's not a lonely question. To me, that's a do you have the right friend group question? Well, that's feeling that's you retreating. That's you retreating and wanting to protect yourself because you don't feel that connection from the people in your life. And I know, again, going back to that paragraph from Untethered Soul, where like if you're already projecting out and you're already having this pain of rejection, then anything that happens, they use other example, one I didn't read, of a dog, where like if you're already dealing with this pain of rejection and not wanting to be alone, and you call for the dog and the dog's out in the yard and they don't come when you call, that then all of a sudden your inner monologue is like, God, even the dog doesn't want to be around me. Like that kind of thing, where like if you're trying to distance yourself from others because you feel like they don't care, did you already feel that pain of feeling like they're not going to care? And then something small happens and they say, oh, they can't hang out, they already have plans tonight. Yeah. That is telling you that they don't care about you.
So point number that I had written down, point number 2 was examine self-talk.
Yeah.
Because every little thing can just bounce back. Of like anyone that doesn't give you the validation that you think they could give you can be like, oh no, therefore I'm not worthy or whatever. And it can be subtle, but it can be really strong.
Yeah. But I would also say to this person to, check in and see if you've really let those people know how you feel, and to try to not necessarily isolate, rather reach out, because you're not alone and there will be someone who will care and who does care. Another question, which I get frequently, actually, I think also just because I share so much about Seattle, but someone said, I'm alone in a new town. How the heck do I make new friends? I'm an introvert and I find meeting new people so hard. Kitt?
I don't know. It's hard. It depends on the city, but I think a lot of people are dealing with this because so many people travel to new places for work and they find cool places. And so I think it's just a thing that we're all just trying to figure out. Like, how do we we start a hobby or join an organization or, but I think invest in the thing that you really care a lot about.
Because when you actually put yourself in activities and hobbies and things that you're really
Even
passionate
if it's just a
about,
hobby,
then that is going to show through authentically for you, and you're going to be connected with people who hopefully are also very passionate about that and are going to be presenting their authentic selves to you as well. And then that's much easier to connect on that kind of a level.
Yep.
And you realize you won't be so alone and you'll make some friends. Another question. All of my friends are in relationships except for me. How do I deal with this? This is like the perpetual Facebook issue.
Yeah. A lot of that's just a phase of life you're in when you're like, you know, and it's going to happen in various levels. Because then maybe you're going to be in a relationship and you're going to be like, all my friends are having kids and we don't have kids. Or all my friends are getting a dog and we don't get it, just because, you know, friend groups change a little bit. But I don't know. That's going to be a thing I think all people deal with always.
Yeah. And I would also say, again, point number 2, check your self-talk and look at what this is making you tell yourself about yourself. I would say if all your friends are in relationships except for you, know that that doesn't mean that you are less than.
Right.
Know that that does not mean that you're going to be forever alone. And know that you still have relationships. You may not be in a romantic relationship, but our romantic relationship is not always the most important or fulfilling relationship in our life. So I would say to, you know, encourage yourself to invest in the other relationships in your life as well. Let's see. Another question.
These are good questions.
Oh, I love this question. Someone said, how do you handle being alone for the first time in your own apartment? That was basically some of my
Yeah.
It wasn't my first apartment because we lived there together and then he moved out. But I mean, the apartment that we're in right now is my first apartment 100% on my own.
Oh, was it really?
Every other place I've lived has been with a boyfriend or,
at some point in the living situation.
Yeah, at some point. Like, this is the first place I've ever picked out that's like just me. I am only keeping myself in mind. Like, this apartment is 100% me.
It is.
Yeah.
I like, though, that in your journal, you said, like, all I need is, you know, my cats and little TV and then some chores or whatever.
Some things to organize.
Some things to organize, yes.
I like to organize.
Which can be important. Like, when you get a new apartment, just try to make it as much of an expression of you as you can.
Yes, I love that.
And that will give you both a creative outlet, but then also a practical one where it's just like, am I expressing something that's disorderly and chaotic? Well, then that may be a great time to take some time to just redo that.
Yeah. And I love that. Like, having your first apartment alone being a full expression of you, because it's going to let you get in touch with yourself more. And then when you are connecting with other people, you're going to be able to show up more authentically in those relationships. And the same girl asked a follow-up question and said how to handle wanting to be alone. But once you're alone, you want to be with others. That's because you're uncomfortable.
Yep. Because being in the relationship reveals some really interesting things about you, and then being out of it also reveals things about you. And
not wanting to sit with those things that are being revealed to you.
Absolutely. And I don't think there's any right or wrong choice there. Like, we either choose to get in the relationship and stay in the relationship and just deal with what that brings up sometimes, or we choose to say, oh, be out of it and then deal with the fact that it gets lonely. And you got to deal with that. So one or the other.
I love our advice. You got to deal with it.
You got to deal with it.
You got to sit with it.
Whichever one you choose, sometimes it's going to suck.
Yep.
But
also knowing that it's not going to last forever.
Nope.
Another person said, I have anxiety about being alone forever. Any tips for how to overcome the anxiety? I would say reality check yourself.
Yeah.
Are you really going to be alone forever? Is there not one person in your life that you have a good relationship with or that you care for or that cares for you? Are you really going to be alone forever?
Mm-hmm. And also, like, that's seasons. Seasons.
Boys just come and go like seasons.
Boys just come and go like seasons. He's my witness. No, that's the wrong part.
Relationships just come in seasons. I don't know.
Well, for some of us.
This will be the last question. There's so many more, and I love that you guys wrote in all these questions and definitely want to answer more questions in future episodes, and hopefully you guys have found this helpful. The question I'm going to end us on, because I think my answer is very obvious.
Ooh.
Do you think animals can help us in coping with being alone or make it harder for us?
Well, I don't know what your answer is going to be. What? Yeah. Go for it.
In my biased perspective, I think animals can help us cope with being alone. And I certainly can see where, when you don't have an animal, that perhaps being alone can be even harder. But for me, I think there's such a reflection of ourselves in our animals that I still feel like I'm having quality time alone, even with that animal.
Do you think it's a crutch, though? Do you think we keep animals around so we don't have to deal with, like, actual humans? Because...
in some ways, but I think, like, the times when I've really sat with, like, being alone and, like, have had... take, for example, a few weeks ago.
Okay.
Like, I could have stayed in the apartment and just, like, cuddled with Lily and just used her as a crutch. But instead, when I was having, a flood of emotions, I walked up to Cary Park, so I got some physical exercise, and I sat and watched the sun set on the mountain and over the city, and was alone, completely alone, and allowed myself to, like, feel all those feelings. Like, I didn't use her as a crutch.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I think they can definitely be of assistance, obviously. But in my biased perspective, I don't see that as negative.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to a little bit play devil's advocate, but, like, as I got a cat a year ago. Mm-hmm. And I think it's changed my life. It's just changed the way that I exist in my home. Having another being there has been really, really helpful. It was nice to be completely, like, have no ties at all for a little while. Mm-hmm. But no, I've found having a pet to be an incredibly healthy thing.
Yeah.
For my own solitude.
Yeah. And hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll see. But there might be an episode coming up about how animals can impact our mental health and how we also kind of impact them. So stay tuned. Maybe that episode will come up.
That could be a really special guest. We'll see, though.
We'll see. So thank you guys for sending in the questions. Really appreciate them. And I wish we had more time to answer some of them. But hopefully through everything else that we have shared, we've indirectly answered some of your questions. Anything you want to leave us on, Kitt?
Go to my Instagram and I'll post that song. I'm talking myself into this. No, it's a good song. I'll play it for you right now. You'll like it.
Yeah. Okay. No, I mean, I'm pretty sure I've heard it before.
Yeah.
But appreciate your vulnerability to share your music with us. Isn't this part of why you love being my friend?
This is one of my favorite songs I've written, so I'm happy to share.
Okay, good. I'm glad. Well, thank you guys for writing us and for listening to this. And hopefully, even if you are alone right now, hopefully you are starting to feel, you know, more in solitude and contentment and, you know, connected whilst being alone. Whilst.
But knowing that it can be hard too, and that's fine. But
yeah, and it's seasons.
Boxes.
Today
Let's
you might
talk
feel
about
alone.
Never say never. Lily.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
We will be back next week to talk more fun things. Please keep leaving us reviews on iTunes. We love seeing what things you guys are taking away from the show. And always feel free to email us questions or topic suggestions at ask.letstalkaboutit@gmail.com. And you can also find us on Instagram at letstalkaboutit_podcast. Talk to you next time.